Hello, thanks for coming back to check out another video. Today we're back in Frascati because we're going to be meeting Ruhma. Ruhma moved from London, and not only has she managed to set up her own business, she's actually set up an international school, a nursery and primary school in Frascati. So come and listen to her story. Hi Ruhma, thank you
Hi.
for spending some time with me today and staying on after school is closed. Obviously I had to come at this time so that children aren't around. I'm not allowed to film any children or anything, but the reason I'm here is I really wanted to hear your story. I'm so curious. I actually read your curriculum, and you've got a curriculum as long as my arm. So I was wondering, how did you end up in Italy and where did you come from?
Well, I came from London and I moved to Italy in 1998 when my daughter was 4 months old because my husband, to whom I'd been married for 3 years, had decided he had had enough of London and he wanted to move back to Italy at all costs. And we decided that we'd do that when our child was very young so that I could use the following years to learn Italian because my parents educated me to be self sufficient and autonomous and not depend on a man to live well and with security. And so I was programmed to work as soon as possible. I was actually offered my dream job a day before my daughter was born. But anyway, we moved to Italy, specifically to Naples, when she was 4 months old.
So your husband's from Naples
Yes,
and you went to university both at the same university?
typical story.
And so what was your first work environment in Italy? Did you eventually manage to find a job? Did you have any difficulty? Because I know as I said, you've got a long curriculum. You're very qualified. How was your experience of actually getting into the workforce in Italy?
Well, when I was at university, I studied which were completely different to what I'm doing now, running a school. And I would have wanted to have gotten into the health sector, perhaps worked in hospitals, in administration, or in the humanitarian sector. So, anyway, when I got to Naples, obviously I had a very young child and I was living with my in-laws initially, and then eventually we remained in Naples for a year and a half, and I tried to work within my field, but unfortunately there was a language barrier and I could only converse and communicate with people who were fluent in English, which were few and far between at the time. And when I went to put my daughter in school, in a creche or asilo nido in Italian, they actually offered me a job based solely on the fact that I was an English speaker, which obviously is preposterous because I was not mildly qualified. I also found it horrific. The idea of being a teacher was alien to me and I found it quite daunting. So, anyway, when I went to enroll my daughter, they actually offered me a job. And that was a bit of a disaster because I could only say ciao, really. So, anyway, one day there was an earthquake in Naples and the light on the ceiling started to swing, and that scared us a little bit, and then we moved to Rome. Obviously we moved for the work opportunities that my husband had offered to him, but I also, being in Rome, got a greater possibility of employment. And I actually called another international school up, Castelli Kindergarten at the time, and I asked her if there were any groups for expats, and she actually told me there was Welcome Neighbor. And from there, I actually got in touch with other expats and started to do small job. Eventually worked for a summer school, always in the Castelli Romani area. And from there, got other opportunities and eventually got funding to open a school.
Okay, before we start talking about your school, I was wondering, were your qualifications that you obtained in England valid here in Italy, or was it like starting all over again?
Oh, yes. My qualifications were valid for working in the health sector and in childcare, but not regarding education. Childcare more in terms of social services types of care, etc. Yes, I had to start from scratch. When I decided to embark on becoming a teacher formally and opening a school, I had to get qualified from zero. So it took a few years. But when you change country and you've got to do what you've got to do, and you have to also take on board that the competitive nature of the work environment in England, for example, is a little slower here, in that perhaps in England you would have 19-year-olds who are working full time, whether they are university students or not. There is a very there's a much stronger work ethic going on at a younger age. People that you would consider to be children in Italy, and who would perhaps stay at home till they're in their 30s. By contrast, in England, or in London at least, as I said, my boss at some point was a 19-year-old when I worked in a clothes shop in London, which was quite normal. So, yes, there you start from scratch, and you have to give up a lot of the ambition, perhaps, and the career path you might have intended for yourself.
I've only briefly read about your school, and I do realise that you're quite a pioneer, and you've really reinvented yourself, but you've also invented something else as well, which I find is very common in Italy. You have to invent your own work. It's very hard to come here and get a job. You've always got to invent something. But you didn't just go for inventing something small. You've actually set up really quite an avant-garde school, haven't you? Don't you think so? Or is it just me that's been out of schools for so long?
I think that, as you've said just now, quite correctly, when you change country, you're not in your comfort zone anymore, and you have to reinvent yourself, and you also automatically become more creative, and also you become more determined almost, because if you're not, you will not succeed with the same ease as you might in your home country, because you know how the system works there. Here you have to be more wary of everybody else around you who is more settled. And so I think automatically you become more pioneering almost, just as a result of the hardships that you face to survive.
So, do you think that actual move, having the guts to make that big move, gives you also the guts or the courage to do something bigger than you might have done in your own environment, in your own country?
That's a very interesting point that you're making. And I think that, yes, I think I wouldn't have been as challenged in London with regards to being innovative. I would have followed a career path. I would have worked hard, I'm sure, but it wouldn't have been something which required me to recreate myself many times to survive, or to create some type of longevity in the for employment for myself.
How long has your school been open? When did you open your first school?
My school has been open since 2006. It's been active. It was created in 2004, but we've had children since 2006. So it's
So
18 years.
you're very well established. It's something that's going extremely well here.
Yes, everything was stable and established and secure, as far as any business can be, because no business is going to be secure. Even Woolworths closed down, didn't it? I think so.
Yeah.
Secure can be until COVID. After COVID, we got a big knock. And being a small company, however, because we are not a medium-sized company, there are 15 employees here. We got a knock, and we had to make great reductions, and just like all the other businesses around the globe, I suppose, had to be extremely careful and change the way we operate. That was another need to reinvent ourselves yet again.
So how did you find opening a business in Italy? It To me it seems almost impossible. I've tried a couple of times. Maybe I just don't have the right personality or the right get up and go. So I really admire people that actually take the bull by the horns, as they would say in Italian, and just get on and do it. Has it been very difficult? Have you come up against a lot of hurdles, or is the fact that you had an Italian husband, I suppose that was fundamental for you to get to know how things should be done, what hurdles you've got to face?
Well, absolutely. It has been rock and roll all the way. And only maybe in the last 5 years, it's been something which is consolidated, and I have now finally understood how everything works, I think. Let me put it like this. If you asked me to do all over again, I don't know if I would. However, circumstances make you battle your way through things. So it was extremely difficult because when I went to the Department of Health inquiring about how one should open a school, they basically said, this is the law and the legal norms and the regulations. Look them up on the internet and read them. And obviously, I couldn't read Italian, and there was no Google Translate at the time. So it was no copy and paste from, because there was no, these norms were not something I myself could understand. But with a dictionary and a translation dictionary, and with the help of my husband to some extent, but not to a great extent at that level, because obviously he had another job to do, I got through it. And again, it's a question of being determined to read and understand to get to the next step. Opening a business in Italy is, as everybody says, a minefield, and there are huge ups and downs. It takes a great amount of energy. You do get there in the end. Perhaps you will have aged 10 years doing it, but once you've done it, you can be happy with yourself. But then there is the situation that regards taxation and accountants, the commercialista, and in understanding yet again other laws and interpreting a lot of data that you are not necessarily ready to do. So it is not frightening. It is very tedious and heavy and exhausting. And the frightening thing in Italy is one, the fact that everything has to be interpreted. Whilst in England, this is the law. In Italy, yes, this is the law, depending how you read it. So
one thing I'm wondering, if you run your own business, what are your pension prospects? Do you have to pay into something, a special program? How does it work?
From what I understand, you do pay into the national pension and you're not particularly privileged. But if you haven't made enough contributions, as in England, for example, they do give you the opportunity to top it up at some point. But, it's the same thing. You have to reach a certain amount of contributions to have the possibility to retire. The business, as you know, has been active for 18 years now, but I certainly don't have the possibility to retire before I'm 65. And the other thing is, of course, in contrast to somebody who is an employee of a company, with a business owner, there are moments like during the COVID disaster where you don't even get an income. You have to cut your own income to ensure that your employees receive theirs. And so, that puts you back a bit. But yes, we will get a pension, but let's hope as business owners we are all alive to enjoy that pension, because owning your own business certainly burns you out. So
Right. And it's obviously going to be based on not just the amount of contributions you've paid in, but what your earnings were in the past as well. So you probably end up even getting less pension than if you'd been a normal employee, I suppose.
could be, yes. I mean, prior to opening the school, I did have a few contracts. Two were with the United Nations, and obviously that type of employment is favorable. Yes, when you own your own business, it's an up and down. So not necessarily going to be worth it in terms of financially, but emotionally and with regards to ambition, yes, you feel satisfied to a certain point. But then if I'm going to be ending up under a bridge, I don't know. Could be.
I didn't know you'd worked for the United Nations, and yet did you leave that to set up your school? Or like United Nations are often contratti a termine,
Yes, they were. I've had actually not 2, 3 short-term contracts, and I also worked in Campus Biomedico, the Rome American Hospital, but and there I was offered a permanent position, but not a position to my liking that was compatible, as this is typical situation again, to being a mother. It would have required me to travel every 2 to 3 months, and my husband having a job as well, and not having his parents or my parents living in the same region of Italy. I mean, mine are in London even now, and his were living in Campania, in Naples, made it such that it was completely impossible, because we were not a particularly wealthy family, and so there was absolutely no question of being able to afford babysitters. So that put that job to a quick end.
So what inspired you to open a school?
Well, nothing particularly charming, let's say. The reason I opened a school was because I noticed a need in the market to provide more choice. And that's basically one of the reasons. The other reason was I was told that I had a flair for teaching, a natural flair. I don't know what that means, only others can say that. And obviously, when you have got a series of small, short term jobs and nothing permanent and stable, you have to take a chance and you have to take a risk. And that was a big risk. And I was bankrupt the second month after I opened. So it was particularly awful, borrowing money from your family and having to repay it back, and everybody not necessarily feeling that you would necessarily be successful. So difficult, but it all worked out in the end. But it could have gone the other way.
And you did everything under your own steam, funding wise?
No, I didn't. I also got a grant from the Italian state for opening a school. So I got a little help, but not to the point that it provided me with much security, but it certainly helped. I think it was in the range of 36,000 euros, and that in 2004 was a good amount of money, but it disappears quickly in furniture and things like that. But it certainly was there, so I do fully recognize, and I'm thankful for that.
So how does that work? Do they give you the money before you set up, or do you have to set up, spend that money, and then they reimburse you?
Yes, you have to set up, spend that money on things that they would approve, and then they check that they are actually present within the premises and they're being used for that purpose. And that way they know that everything's above board.
So you can't really count on that help. It all depends on what they decide afterwards. Is that right?
Yes, you have to set up your company, hope that you're going to win this grant, and then you have to, if you get it, it makes life slightly easier, and if you don't get it, good luck.
So Ruhma, are you an Italian citizen? You got married to an Italian, so I presume it was quite easy, or wasn't it? How did you go about it?
Well, when I got to Italy, I called the offices, the state offices that regarded citizenship, and I was told there was no real need for me to apply for Italian citizenship because I had British citizenship, and Britain was in the European Union. Obviously, I relaxed at that. I was told the only two things that I would be unable to participate in was voting at a certain level and in applying for a state job, for which I would need Italian citizenship. So let's say 25 years passed, and then when Brexit, not 25, I think 23 or 24, because Brexit was how many years ago? I don't know. I can't remember anyway.
2016.
Yeah, something like that. So in 2016 approximately, when Brexit actually took place, and my parents voted for it, and so did my sister, and I was very bemused by that, because I said, goodness gracious, what are you doing? Anyway, so when the government announced this, I understood that I had to get citizenship or have a type of document that allowed me to re-enter Italy after being abroad for any given amount of time. Then I
Even
realized,
though you had a business?
Oh, yes. And a business for obviously more than a decade, which had paid many contributions to the state. And besides the fact that my husband is Italian, it wasn't really necessary for me to be Italian at the time. I was quite happy being British and passing from country to country without any problem. So anyway, I made this application, and for some reason I decided to do it all myself, to get all the paperwork. It took about 3 years, very difficult, because some documents are easy to come by, other documents aren't. And one would think there is a database where they could get, your documents from England easily, and it doesn't really work like that, I suppose, and unless you're a VIP. And I spent quite a lot of money doing it, because you have to get documents also from your country of birth. And I was born in Pakistan, and they told me I had to go back to Pakistan, and I hadn't been there for 20 odd years, more than 26 years. And I'd have to get authentication of my birth certificate from the state I was born in. I'm like, goodness gracious, how am I going to do that? So a lot of stress. I didn't go. I got a family member to help me, but I was required to go back to my country of birth, that I hadn't been to for many, many years. So in the end, I got citizenship, and even there, the Italian bureaucracy changed the law just a couple of weeks before I was supposed to get it, and said, okay, you have to get this other document as well. So I mean, after the 3 years, I said to myself, okay, another month or two of delay is not going to change anything, but it does make your hair fall out of your head.
So you got British citizenship anyway?
I already had British
Okay.
citizenship, because I lived in the UK since I was 1, and my parents are there to date. But I never thought I'd have to get Italian citizenship. But it does make you feel a little safer, because it obviously, after I've lived half my life in the UK and half my life here now. So
you are Italian?
Yes, I
You're Italian in
suppose
the end.
so. I am Italian in that sense, and I'm happy to say I've got Italian citizenship. But obviously, I'm also British. When I go back to London, I also feel a nostalgia towards everything. So it is the usual globalization story, that you don't end up knowing exactly where you came from and where you're going to end up. Born here, lived there, will die there. It's like that.
So if you're running a business, you have Italian staff, I presume, employees. How do you find working with Italians?
Important, because you must have a certain number of Italian. The majority of staff here are not Italian, but it is important, because already, even with the Italian employees within our company, for example, the local community will still see you, in my opinion, as an alien entity, not exactly a fully integrated part of their society. And you have to make yourself so. You have to connect with businesses that are your suppliers, and with businesses that are connected to you because they are, for example, in my case, part of the educational sector. Only by building relations that truly connect you financially, or with regards to services or information, do you get integrated. Otherwise, you will remain a foreign company. And obviously, I'm not Glaxo. We're little genius. So you may be excluded from certain activities that other businesses like yourself, but which are Italian, are included in. So you have to make sure that you push a little bit and you're aware, because you can get lost into your foreign mentality, and that is not particularly going to be helpful. I see this with many big international schools who have governance which is not composed of Italian natives. So they sometimes find Italian legislation and the ways of a culture, let's say, astounding in some area, in some sectors, which, having lived in Italy now for more than 2 decades, I say to myself, why are they making such a big fuss about this? And why are they getting cross about that? Because you also become Italian, as you say.
Anybody that doesn't want to live in the expat bubble, you've got to be integrated. So what makes your school special?
Our school is distinguish itself or tries to distinguish itself from others only in terms of the fact that we're very interested not only in the daily education, so teaching, but also because we like research and development in education. So we sponsor a lot of educational innovations. For example, it can be programs that students can use for using computer systems, or it can be research in a certain aspect of education, like the teaching of music, and a university team could be working on something that is innovative in that area, and we would be interested in sponsoring it and perhaps even using our students to experiment in a enjoyable way for the students, new toys or something which will help them to learn more effectively. So our school is interested in moving education into the future, not necessarily with full blown digital tools, because we started off as a fairly digitalized school, and then we have adjusted ourselves over the years, because being interested in research and child psychology and the diversity of children's minds, from children who are autistic, so neurological diversity, to students who do not have that neurological diversity, but perhaps have got different types of minds. We have adjusted our use of technology in our application, and we've moved away more from screens. So we're not a school that puts a computer and says, let's use that to teach. Oh, wow, our students are using computers. We do not do that. We do not think it's particularly good in the primary school, and obviously not in the nursery. But we are more interested in making children use digital tools to create things like in robotics, for example, and coding. But we certainly don't like children being in front of computers. Absolutely not. You can never bring a mobile phone into our school. I know today I heard in the news that in the UK they've actually banned the use of all mobile devices in schools now. I think it's become the law from today. And so why somebody might choose our school is because we are always looking to improve through engaging the research and development community. And the only other reason that distinguishes us is also because we have our own methodology called infinite child evolution. Many schools have a curriculum that is common to all of them across the globe. In our case, we do not have a curriculum which is global or standardized. We don't use standardized textbooks. We use open sources because we think we can give students a lot more information thanks to the existence of the internet, which they do not use, of course, but we do to expand the lessons we provide. And our methodology is something that's attracted a lot of attention from school principals and educators from abroad. So we get a lot of visitors inquiring about it. And it's got a heavy ethical component as well.
So what made you choose Frascati for your school and not Rome? Why?
Well, first of all, because I live in the Castelli Romani. And second of all, if I had a choice and I won €1 million, I would still put it here. Rome, to me, is saturated with international schools, and I am certainly someone who is aversive to exposing children to air pollution. It's something I particularly find disturbing. I was in Naples last week, and I went to a very big school that had about 6,000 students, and it was in the heart of the city, extremely polluted area, and beautiful. But I was surprised learning about what air quality these children are being exposed to. My school certainly, it is lacking the forest that should be around me. My resources don't allow me to do that, but I would certainly have wanted a school with a lovely forest connected to it. And therefore, I'm very favorable to forest schools in that sense. But I would never have opened a school in Rome, even if it would have meant financially we would have been more stable, because Castelli Romani and Frascati in particular is a town which is still maintained its traditions and culture. And for me, small is also beautiful. I prefer small to medium sized schools in green areas rather than big schools in urban areas which have got more population and therefore more tension. So even our class numbers are about 15 students per class. So yes, the countryside forever.
Okay. Are your students mainly Italians that have the extra advantage of learning English while they're here, or are they international students? Because there's quite a large expat community around here, isn't there? I don't think people realize how many expats are in the Castelli Romani. I think mainly because of the European Space Agency, which needs to be said. Frascati is home to the European Space Agency. So are your kids Italian? Are they mixed?
Our students are reflective of the diversity in the local community. So we've got about 60 to 70% Italian students, and the remaining are foreigners, of which about 10% are Chinese. And we actually are happy about that because we understand that the request for international schooling has changed. Whilst in the past it was for expats to provide their children with educational continuity and to be with the idea that they would eventually move back to their home countries, now everybody seems to need an international education, or at least want an international education to different extents. If they're Italian, because they want to internationalize their children, whilst the expat community or the foreigners that come to us, so the 20-30% that we have, would very much like to learn Italian and to continue, in many cases, the international mix that they have in their home countries.
So, Ruma, after all you've been through to open this school, the success it's had, and your experience of living here, do you think you're going to be staying in Italy now? Do you think you'll stay in the area? Is it your dream to move to somewhere else in Italy, maybe once you retire or something?
I think that I will probably die here because, like many people who come from a different country who have married somebody that is native, I've got a child and I've got a grandchild here. So it means that I've got a second generation and a third generation. I travel back and forth to London 4 times a year for my parents who are in their 80s. So, yes, I probably live here forever. And I think I'll probably continue to travel back to London even after my parents have passed away, because it also has a certain level of importance to me to keep in touch with my culture of origin, even if I'm Indo-Pakistani. But England, London is where I've lived my most of my life, so it's home for me as well. Italy is also home to for me, but so I need to be able to do both. I would probably wish, however, to live in Italy for most of the months in the year, because it's a very beautiful country, and it's got a certain level of it gives you a certain level of relaxation that and outdoor living that you can't have in London, because London is very fast moving, it's very competitive. So I think that I will stay here forever if they will have me.